Pumpkin spice latte. Oh, hey, I didn't see you there. I was just enjoying my beautiful fall beverage in my warm, cozy sweater and just about to put on a fall Genesis or Phil Collins or Ant Phillips record. You know, one of those records that you only listen to in fall or gives you those warm, cozy feelings like pumpkin spice does, whatever pumpkin spice is. Okay, scratch that. It's actually a scorcher up here right now. I got to take this off. Okay, so here's the origin of today's video. Where I am, and I know it's not the same for everywhere in the world, but where I am, it's fall now, or fall is just coming into season. It feels like fall. And it was a couple mornings ago, I was sitting down having a cup of coffee, and I put on a record, and I was actually choosing a record from my collection, and I only listened to the Genesis, Phil Collins, Peter Gabriel, Anthony Phillips section of my record collection. And I was realizing, like, I have a lot of good records that fit fall, you know, from this realm. Obviously, there's a couple obvious ones, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. But I was like, man, I should do a top 10 albums for fall. Like, you know, we kind of did, remember we did like the best Phil Collins summer songs? Well, I thought, you know, there's probably a lot of good records for fall in this universe. And so let's talk about them. Well, I started to put a top 10 together and I was like, maybe I should just check with other people to see, because my top 10 might not be the same as other people's top 10. So I posted on Reddit on the Genesis group to see what other people would say. And I posted on Instagram as well and on our YouTube to try to get some feedback, as well as in our Patreons. Pause for a second. Shout out to our Patreons. Thanks for supporting the channel and getting access to all of the bonus videos and chatting with our community and all the behind the scenes stuff. So come over and join us there. Shout out to them. So I started to make my top 10 and then I realized, okay, there's some problems. Some of my top 10s might be a little bit subjective. I don't know if they're other people's top 10s. So that's why I went to poll people to find out if other people agreed with me. Now, because of this, I hit a bit of a roadblock. I realized this is pretty much subjective, with the exception of maybe two records. There are two records that seem to be where there seems to be a pretty good consensus. But I realized that some of the records on my list did not equate with other people and vice versa. They had some records that just did not make sense to me as, why would you think this is a fall record? And I'm sure the same can be said for me. I'll give you an example. I was thinking about one of the records I was going to put on my list was A Hot Night in Paris. And the reason being is because, like, I listen to a lot of jazz in the fall. I don't know why, but like, I like to be cozy in my living room, dinner parties, you're back inside, and I put jazz records on. So I kind of like listen to jazz records. I bought this great Diana Krall record years ago when I was in high school. That's how cool I was. And I don't know, it was in the fall, and now I just kind of associate fall with jazz music. And so I really like Hot Night in Paris. It's just, to me, it's like a great jazz record. However, I think it was recorded in the summer, right? And that's why it's called A Hot Night in Paris, maybe? I don't know. Even just the title and the artwork doesn't really feel like a fall record. So I was like, I can't include that on my list because it's only me who likes jazz in the fall. Maybe other people aren't going to understand. This is when I started to realize how subjective this whole conversation is. So here's an example. When I went to Reddit and I posted in the Genesis group, best fall albums, because I had some on my own, but I wanted to know if my list lined up with other people's lists. And I realized it didn't. For example, look at this person here. Okay, so they've categorized all of the records by seasons, which is kind of cool, right? This is mostly just Genesis stuff. They're not doing Phil Collins stuff. And so if you look at the Genesis stuff, in the spring category, they put Trespass, whereas I personally feel like that's a fall record. I feel like Dusk is like a beautiful fall song, Stagnation. I don't know. I really like that, but I also think it could be a winter album. And some people say it's a winter album. So like for me, Trespass could be fall or winter. This person, they put it in their spring list. Same thing with Selling England by the Pound. They said that Selling England by the Pound is the ultimate spring record. Kind of agree, although I like to listen to it in winter as well. So I don't really know where Selling England by the Pound would be, but a lot of people have said that's a good fall record. It actually came out in the fall. It's kind of a autumnal. So I don't know. Did it come out in the fall? I'm pretty sure it did. Same thing with Trigger the Tail. Trigger the Tail is a winter album for me. Why? I don't know. I have some theories as to why things are like winter albums or fall albums or springs. Stay with me. Okay, so for this person, they said Nursery Crime. There's a lot of consensus there. I agree with that. Even just the artwork, it's kind of fall colors, which is weird, right? Because they put Foxtrot as spring. And is that just because it's a blue cover and Nursery Crime is orangish yellow? Is it just the covers? Like, is the music of those two albums that much different, that one sounds like spring and one sounds like fall? I don't know. So in fall, they put Wind and Wuthering, ultimate fall album. I completely agree. And I think like most people agree that like this whole conversation, everyone agrees that Wind and Wuthering is a fall record. And to me, that's like the ultimate fall record. Whoever wrote this list, I completely agree with Wind and Wuthering. Now, they put Duke as a fall record. That's insane. You're a crazy person. Duke is quite obviously a spring record or even a summer record. That's absurd. Self-titled as a fall record, maybe not for me personally, but okay. And then they said winter, and then there were 3 in Calling All Stations. I 100% agree with that. I don't know why, but I 100%. They said, and then there were 3 is ultimate winter album. Is that because of Snowbound? Like, seriously, is that just because of Snowbound? Maybe. Could be. Here's another interesting take. Spring, Selling England, Trespass, Peter Gabriel 1, Abacab. Abacab, I'd say, is spring. Geese and the Ghost. Summer, they say Duke, Foxtrot, Invisible Touch, No Jacket Required. I totally agree. No Jacket Required is total summer record for me. So for autumn, they say Wind and Wuthering, Nursery Crime, Spectral Morning, Shapes, Hello, I Must Be Going. Interesting. Okay, cool. Oh, and then people put The Lamb. They say all over the place, right? Like there's no consensus of where The Lamb goes. Here's another funny thing. So somebody from Los Angeles says, we have no weather. And that's kind of funny too, right? There are people in the world who live in such a temperate, common climate that they don't really feel like putting a sweater on or having a warm pumpkin spice latte. I guess that's kind of the privilege of where I live here in Canada, is that there are like 4 distinct seasons. Like we have fall where the leaves change colors and you got to put a sweater on and it's very like warm, and we have like a definite winter for sure. And then we have like very nice spring, and then like a cliche summer. So we have all 4 seasons here. And of course, wherever you are in the world, it may be the start of summer for you right now. Speaking of another subjective comment on this list, is that it's interesting is that even though that people do agree that there are seasonal albums, that there are albums that they tend to listen to more in certain times of year, what's interesting is that that is completely unique to your own experiences with the record or the way you perceive the record. I honestly think that has most to do with just when you first heard the record or what you most associate that album with in your memory. So, for example, We Can't Dance is a winter album for me, but more specifically, it's a Christmas album. In fact, I listen to that more than I listen to traditional Christmas music. When I feel like Christmas is coming and the malls start playing Simply Having a Wonderful Christmas Time, I put We Can't Dance on. I think No Son of Mine is my Christmas song. And the reason being is it a Christmas album? Does it look like a Christmas album on the front cover? No, but it came out close to Christmas in November. But more importantly for me, I didn't really hear the album. I was just a little boy. I didn't hear the album until Christmas morning. I got it on cassette, plus I got a Walkman. So I distinctly remember in the back of the car on Christmas morning, driving to my grandparents' house, listening to this We Can't Dance album, listening to No Son of Mine, then Jesus He Knows Me, then rewinding and doing that again, maybe flipping it over, listening to I Can't Dance, but pretty much just listening to the hits on Christmas morning. And so very visceral connection to We Can't Dance as a Christmas record. And I know I've heard from a lot of you that you have the same feeling. Well, maybe you came into Genesis and for some reason, the first time you ever heard We Can't Dance was in the summer, and that's become a summer record for you. Which leads me to another question I have, and I want to know if I'm the only weird person. I enjoy records the most when I first hear them. That makes a lot of sense. And the season or the month in which I hear that kind of becomes the home of that record. So much so that I often won't listen to that record, just like general records that I come in contact with. I often find that like I'll only re-listen to those records in that season that I heard it. So for another example is like when I first got married, that Keane record came out, Hopes and Fears. Somebody was talking about it recently because I think Mike and Tony are fans of that record. And it's also like a very CP70 heavy record. So Hopes and Fears is a great album. I heard that in December in the year that I got married, and I just associate it. And so now, like every time like the winter's coming, I always put that record on, and it just reminds me of those times. The same thing with like associating a John Mayer album with back to school. Like when it's back to school season, I listen to a couple of these records. So I don't know if you're like that, like the season season of the year, or like the month of the year that you first heard a record, like that's the only time that you can listen to that record. Very much what people do with Christmas music. I do that with like almost all albums. Not necessarily the case with Genesis and Phil Collins records. I feel like those have kind of transcended those rules for me, with the exception of maybe We Can't Dance. Anyway, are you like that? Is that weird? Like if you buy an album in March and you like absolutely love it and you listen to it nonstop, and then like maybe after a couple months it wears out and you don't listen to it anymore, and then you never listen to it again until the following March. Am I the only one? I think that's weird. The conclusion is I couldn't really make a top 10 Genesis, Phil Collins, Steve Hackett, Anthony Phillips, Peter Gabriel albums list because nobody was giving me any sort of consensus, with the exception of 2 albums. Wind and Wuthering seems to be the most fall record across the board. Why though? Didn't it come out in December? So why wouldn't it have been seen as a Christmas album or a winter album? Why is it a fall record? I completely agree though. I mean, the leaves are falling off the tree. It's autumnal colors. I find the music to be very fall-like. So for me, Wind and Wuthering is 100% a fall record. It makes my fall and autumn seasons way better. I really don't listen to it much in the summer or spring unless it's part of a compilation or a live album. So completely agree with that record. For me, another absolutely stunning fall record, although I can see why it would be considered spring, is Geist and the Ghost by Anthony Phillips. To me, that is just an absolute stunning acoustic folk record that fits the fall season really well. Although now that I think about it, it really could be a great spring record. The artwork is kind of springy, or even summer. It's got like the picture of the Shire on the front cover. You know what? See, this is why this was an impossible video to make. It really was, because I thought the Geist and the Ghost was like 100% a fall record. If you listen to it, it's 100% a fall record. But then when you look at the cover, it's like, oh, this would be a beautiful summer album to listen to in the cabin in the woods in the summertime or the spring. This is tough. This is really tough. So there you have it. That's my top 10 fall albums. We have no top 10 fall albums, with the exception of number 1, which is Wind and Wuthering. A couple other albums that I would have put on my list was Testify. And again, that goes to when the album comes out. And a lot of people say that too. A lot of people say that when the album came out, that's kind of the season that they associate with it. And so for me, I was in college, Testify came out. It's a very fall record for me. Somebody else in our Patreon mentioned that Us from Peter Gabriel is a very fall record for them. After hearing that, I went back and listened to it myself, and I thought, I just don't hear fall in this album at all. But I can't take that away from anyone. It's the same reason why We Can't Dance is a Christmas record for me. Nobody can take that from me, but nobody else is going to hear that. I went through some of the Steve Hackett stuff too, and even the same thing with Tony Banks stuff. It's like, I thought, is A Curious Feeling a fall record? Is Small Creeps Day a fall record? I can kind of hear that a little bit. But if I put that on my list, then everyone else is going to be like, whoa, 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 Small Creeps, no. It's a spring record. It's a summer record. So this was a fool's errand. It was a complete failed video. But it was really interesting to learn that music is so subjective, seasons are subjective, that we tie records to different moments in our lives, to different seasons. We have all sorts of irrational reasons as to why we like things and why we want to hear things at certain times of the year. So now I want to hear from you officially in the comments. If you want to categorize all the Phil records as to what time of year you like to listen to those records, if you want to do the same thing with Genesis, please do that in the comments, because I really, really want to know. If you do think there are top 10 fall albums, and I want you to include Phil records and Peter and Steve's records and Tony's and Genesis records, any records in the universe that you want to include, please do give me your top 10 fall records. I'm just curious. I think if I see a record in there that just doesn't make sense to me as a fall record, I'm going to go and listen to it to see if that makes sense. And if you want to be a part of this type of crazy, irrational conversations on a daily basis on the Patreon app on your phone, then come over and join our Patreon group. We'd love to have you. Thanks for watching.